Hello and welcome back to Wisdom in Action, the podcast where we explore what it takes to bridge the gap between knowing and doing, because that's where the real wisdom is born. I'm Austra, resilience coach and podcast strategist, and I created this space to have honest conversations with real experts and bring you practical insights you can apply, not just think about. Today, we are joined by Claire Callahan, an award-winning health and social care director and leadership coach who spent nearly 30 years building value-driven teams that thrive. She's here to share how great leadership starts with self-care, clarity, and compassion, and how you can create a workplace where everybody shines. Claire, welcome to Wisdom in Action.
Welcome to you. Thank you very much for having me, Austra.
It's great to have you on. I really look forward to what 30 years of experience in leadership can bring to this conversation. So, to start us off, what is one piece of wisdom that changed everything once you started applying it?
I think for me, it was the realization that my values and the values I wanted to bring through the organization were central to success. And I think most of us don't really consider what our values are, but actually giving that a lot of thought and how we wanted the organisation to work and how we could filter those values through the team led to a big transformation in how we led and how we managed and the eventual outcomes then for our service users. So we've become very values driven in the way that we operate, and they are completely embedded throughout the team. And I think that's just led to just really a different approach to leadership and a different approach to the sector that I work in. And off the back of that, we've created a team that's dedicated, loyal, and that has exceptionally low turnover, which again is really unusual in the sector that we're in.
That is very interesting. The link between your own values and values within the company and the culture. How did you get to realizing this? And do you have any advice for people listening that might be scratching their heads, being like, I don't even what do you mean what do you even mean by values? What is the link? I think like my personal values are way different from the business values.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was actually when we were looking to transform the business that we're in, we actually had a business coach who really helped us formulate the values that we wanted for the business. And I now do this as part of my leadership training. The first module that we look at is people understanding their own values. So the way that I approach that is I give people a big long list of values. You know, you can go online and Google common values and you'll come up with a list of 100 different values. And then what we do is narrow that down, really start breaking that down and thinking about the things that are absolutely inherently important to you. And you might end up with a list of 20, 30 that you think are your core values. But again, that's just too many. So through conversation, then we break that down into smaller and smaller areas until we've got 3 to 5 core values. And what we mean by core values is the things that are absolutely necessary for you to have in your life. So, for example, if we chose, so one of my core values is growth. So if I'm looking at growth, I'm thinking, what can I learn? How can I develop? How can I improve? And I'm constantly looking for strategic ways of improving myself, not just at work, but at home as well, how I can be a better person, how I can have a growth mindset, how I can take on board any learning and then share that with other people. So we really look at what's fundamental to you as a person. And then if you're doing that in a group setting, it helps you really understand why different people are motivated by different things. And then as a team, you can work together to identify what the values that run through all of you are. So as a team, we created what we call our ICE values. And so what we expect from people is integrity, compassion, and excellence through every area of their work. And that's now become foundational to everything that we do. So competency checks, supervisions, appraisals, what we're looking for is practical applications of those values. So how people are demonstrating those values to us day in, day out with their work. And because everybody is striving towards those values, if somebody isn't operating within that value base, they can be called out by the colleagues and saying, listen, we all agreed we were going to be compassionate. That isn't a compassionate stance to take. So people become self-motivating, they motivate the peers, and so the team then just works together knowing what the outcomes and expectations are.
I'm curious to hear which one is, I kind of have a feeling I might know the answer, but which one is harder to create this new culture from the beginning or to shift the current culture into the new one? Because both scenarios I think are quite common. Probably second one might be even like more common. And what are some of the challenges that you have seen people experience, one, starting that culture or shifting into it? Because I think a lot of it is sounds good, but it probably is way more work than you might think.
Absolutely. It's not, and we changed the culture. That's what we did. We changed the culture. So this hasn't been something that we've done for 28 years. This is something that we've done over the last 6 years, and it's gone from strength to strength. And yeah, it's not an easy transition. And it requires engagement from all the senior leaders within the organization. So it has to start there. It has to start with all the senior leaders being completely on board, completely engaged. And then they have to live and breathe those values. So they have to be demonstrating them in every possible way. So if I pick integrity, which is one of our values, if I'm then heard criticizing or saying something unpleasant about another member of the team or about anybody, then I'm not living and breathing that integrity. So we have to demonstrate that entirely. And then we have to allow the team time to consider their options and consider how they put these values into place. So there was lots of discussion, lots of team meetings, all coming together and deciding what those values should be. And then once we've told everybody and everybody's had a say in that process, they are then fully engaged in that process and become part of that decision-making team. So you've already got people on board because they feel like they've been included. They haven't had something thrust upon them. They are part of that decision-making process. But there are always going to be people who don't agree with the decisions you've made, or their own values are misaligned with the company values. And so eventually they're going to be people who are not the right fit for your organization. And as difficult as that is, it's better to move on without those people than struggle for years trying to get them to accept those changes. So change is difficult, and we have lots of change management systems in place that enable us to keep that transition, that change as smooth as possible. But change is difficult for everybody, and not everybody is going to come along for that change. And I think that as a leader, you need to be prepared that you're going to lose people along the way, but they weren't the right people for you anyway.
Yeah, like the reason I asked it is I know how hard is behavior change just for
Mm.
one person alone. And if you now add to that the complexity of dynamics of a group, especially if it's already integrated over the years where it's certain dynamic and there's certain roles, certain players within that dynamic, I can imagine how it can stir up a lot of even resistance or actually, a question I had was what to do if, let's say, you're trying to create this new culture, but one of the key players of the business are not aligned with the core values, but they're really, really important player in the team.
So it's really important to identify who those key players are early on in the process. So you want somebody who has the influence that people listen to, that people respect, and they're the people you need to onboard first into that process, because you know that their sphere of influence is bigger than maybe their colleague. So if you can get them on board, then it's going to make your job a lot easier. So you would start with them. You would start with saying, I think you're the right person to help us lead on this. You empower them. You give them the ability to lead their section of the team, and share what they've learned. And I think usually, if you are a leader who is motivating and engaging and believes in empowering people, I found personally I can usually get people on board with that, by explaining the outcomes. So not by just going in and saying, listen, this is what we're doing, get on board with it or don't. But actually, I'd really love you to be on board with this, because I think if we get on board with this, you as a team lead or whatever your position is going to have a great influence, and you're going to have a great team working for you. And what we all want at the end of the day is better outcomes for our service users. So if I can get you on board with this, we're going to see better outcomes, and that's what we're here for. So it's about finding out who those key individuals are and bringing them with you on that journey. If after all the support, if after all the conversations, that person's not on board with you, that's when it becomes a more difficult conversation. And at that point, you know, that's when you become a little bit clearer in your expectations. You know, this is the way we are developing it. And if this is not something you can get on board with, then this might not be the right place for you to be working. And again, we just might encourage people to find somewhere where they might be working in an establishment that more closely aligns to their own values. And that's okay. That's okay. You know, you lose people on that journey, but what you do end up doing is building a team that is absolutely motivated by those values, motivated by the leadership that they see around them, and want to be part of that.
Actually, as you were speaking earlier, I was thinking about how, well, one is work-life balance, where I was thinking that, well, if you're in an organization where, one, they have these values, even the values that you shared, I was thinking everybody should have these values regardless of where they work, just by themselves. Integrity, compassion, excellence. If all of us had those values, they're so powerful, whether it's workplace or outside of it. And I was thinking about the work-life balance, whether it has, and I'm really curious to hear your perspective on it, if it has become a thing, because a lot of us, when we go to work, we don't feel like people care for us. We don't really enjoy what we're doing. There's no sense of connection to the job. We just feel like, well, I'm there to get my paycheck so that I can leave and do whatever I do outside of the work. Um, is that something that you have noticed, how the changing the culture and actually leading with those values in mind can change not only the way people show up, but also their well-being and work-life balance?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's you know, that health and social care is not an easy sector to work in. It's physically demanding, but more so it's emotionally and mentally taxing as well. We're looking after people who are nearing end of life. We're looking after people who have complex neurological conditions. And so supporting the team is my key role. And, you know, people say, oh, work is my family. It's not. Work is work. But that doesn't mean to say you don't care. And by creating a really strong theme of compassion that runs throughout the team, that means people will step up and support each other. So if somebody's having a really tough time and their work is not to the standard it usually is, our first response is not to say, what's going on? Pull your socks up. Our first response is to say, actually what's going on with this person. This isn't like them. They are suddenly consistently late or tired or not appearing to work to the same standards. So the rest of the team then pick up that slack, if you like, and will be concerned for that person rather than trying to blame that person for not working as hard as they usually do. So that just gives you that balance when you're coming into work. And because of the environment we've created, a lot of my time is spent just listening to the team. You know, we have quite a few people on the team who are very open about their mental health struggles. We have several neurodiverse members of the team. We have got people who have been addicts in their previous life, who are all very open in discussing their difficulties and their problems. So it creates a strength and an openness to be able to talk around difficulties and for people to be able to come in and feel psychologically safe in work. So feeling psychologically safe in work means that when you go home, you are not stressing about coming in the next day. You've done your job, you've gone home, you're relaxing. And so there isn't that constant barrage of processing what happened that day, what went wrong that day. You've done your job, you go home, concentrate on home life, come back in on your next shift, ready to start again. And I think people just feel empowered to actually come to me and say, I'm struggling with this. Do you think I might be neurodiverse? You know, this is a conversation that I have quite a lot where people will come and ask me and ask for opinions and advice on that. We have lots of open days, lots of events where people bring their family in. So it just feels really connected and we feel like a vital part of our community and a vibrant part of that community.
I think connection is a really important one because we are human beings, as much as we are all in society where it's about striving, achieving, and everything. When you are disconnected as you are on your pursuits, there's a big difference. Like even a simple example that whenever I go home to visit my family, I always feel like my nervous system gets regulated. I get way more calm. I'm more relaxed. I don't feel as not necessarily agitated, but kind of like not as calm. Like that, and it's something that I don't even have to have any because like most families, I think we know how to push each other's buttons and everything. So it's not that it's always like super great and glorious, but there's something about being around people that are close to you that you connect with that I think if we don't have that, at least that's what you said about psychological sense of like safety at work, then this whole time you're anxious throughout the whole work day, or even before you go to work, you already are dreading it because you don't want to look forward to that environment. And through that, actually I had a guest share really interesting statistic. He's specializing in self-care, and he said that in Australia, I think on average, companies spend like 80,000 a year on like mental health. And I think he said it per employee. That's how bad it is. Where I think it's kind of like this pendulum swing has gone so far that now work is everything, but at the same time the workplace doesn't really match our mental health needs.
Absolutely. Yeah. You know, I've had people on the team who, when they've joined us, if they're having a tough time with their mental health, they've been afraid to come forward because they've had poor experiences in other workplaces where mental health has been seen to the posters will be up on the wall and, you know, we care and it's very much a tick box exercise. And then the relief that you see on people that they're not going to get sacked or they're not going to be looked down upon because they're suffering with the mental health is just palpable. You know, you can just feel that release of nervous energy, that people actually know they're in a safe place, and that those difficulties that they have are understood, and we will always endeavour to sort of work around that and support people through it. And yeah, people don't, the surveys that we send out and the conversations that we have, people don't dread coming to work. And it and part of the reason that I'm moving into the more of the leadership, more of the coaching side, with combining the leadership and the well-being, is because I want everybody to feel like that. The health and social care sector is so stressful and so difficult. And historically, turnover is so incredibly high because people just keep getting burnt. And I want people to experience what it can be like to work in somewhere that does care as much for the people that work there as the people that they're caring for. And I would just love to see that approach more nationally, because there are some excellent providers out there, but the turnover, the people leaving the sector, everything really indicates that people are not happy in those roles. And if I can just help one or two managers to understand what they can do to support the teams, then I think that's a big win.
So where to start with supporting your team as a manager?
It's listening. It's listening far more than talking. It's being open. And sometimes it just takes a lot of persistence. That you might have somebody who is very emotionally closed. And so that might be a year of, where I am if you need anything, let's have a conversation. And eventually people start to open up. And again, that sense of relief then when people sort of get things off the chest is amazing. So it comes with listening. It comes with, and I don't just mean sitting and nodding. I'm talking about listening to the things that people aren't saying, watching their responses to questions, having the ability to ask those deeper questions and really get to the hub of what people are saying. It's about reasonable adjustments. So if people are struggling with the mental health, if people are struggling with neuro diversity, that means they can't handle a particular situation on a particular day, then it's making those reasonable adjustments in order to support people. And a lot of it is also about empowering people. So I think what happens in our sector, and I think happens in a lot of sectors, is people will be promoted because they're brilliant at their job, and they're promoted, but they're no longer doing the same job, so they're no longer brilliant. And people are just expected to know how to lead a team, or expected to oversee the production of something which they've never done before, and they're not given the right support to achieve. And people end up then feeling frustrated, leaving their job, or getting demoted. So by empowering the team, we've created an environment where everybody is sort of striving to move on and learn and grow and train. So by supporting the team, by delegating work that people are capable of, you're not delegating something that's too much of a stretch, but you're going to give them a job that's a bit of a stretch so that actually they feel like they're accomplishing something. So you delegate, you empower, and it just makes people feel good. It makes people feel like you are entrusting them, you are respecting them, and you are giving them the ability to shine and to grow and to develop. And that comes back then in spades. So you're not micromanaging, you're not standing over watching what people are doing and their every move and critically feeding back. If you need to feed back that something's not working, you do that with radical candor, you do it with honesty, you do it with openness. But it's about supporting them. And if they are working within the values and they are making decisions that they believe are right in that moment, you stand by them. You just stand by that decision and support them through.
And I think big one also is I heard it somewhere. There's like few things that I wanted to add with when it comes to the communication, which sounds like big part of it. I think anything that involves humans is
Mhm.
communication. And one thing that I was pondering on this for years because I was trying to understand, why do people trust me? Why do people open up to me? And it has been like since really young age, which partly probably led me to psychology stuff. um, but one thing that I understood is that the way I would approach people would be with curiosity instead of judgment. Because the moment that people feel judged, they close off. But if you approach them with curiosity, and then I understood that with curiosity, what you do is you gather information, you try to understand what's the situation. And then when it comes to judging good, bad, right, wrong, because you understand, there's no place for judgment left because you actually understand where they're coming from, what's the situation. And then you have information that you can work with and present to them or give some suggestions if they're open to that. But it's something that I find it really important to learn to create that safe space, safe communication, and approach it from a place of I care, I believe in you, I want you to do the best. But the other thing I wanted to add that I remembered as at the end as you were speaking is that a lot of that, like, I heard one business owner, I think, talk about it, that all of your team's mistakes and problems, it's your responsibility. So instead of attacking them, pointing fingers at them, it's about, oh, it's my fault, I didn't communicate it right, or I didn't do this, or I didn't set this boundary, whatever might be the case. I know that it has helped me with the people that I'm working with to, because sometimes it's so frustrating where there's some mistakes made that it's like, we shouldn't be making these mistakes anymore, but they're still made. And it's easy to then go or want to go and be, I don't know, strict. Well, accountability is important, but it's also the way we communicate accountability, where it's about, okay, how can I make your job easier? What is it that we could do together, co- collaborating on, like, how can we make this better? This is the problem. How can we fix it together? What are your ideas, my ideas? And then we kind of attack the problem instead of each other.
Yeah, 100%. And I love that, coming with curiosity rather than judgment. I think that's a brilliant way to phrase it. It's it's taking ownership, and it feeds into the integrity that I was talking about. It's taking ownership of, if something goes wrong in that team, what haven't I done? Have I not shared the knowledge? Have I not shared the expectation? Have I not communicated what we expect clearly enough? So you have to take a step back and look up instead of constantly sort of looking down at what's happening, looking up at the bigger picture and trying to take responsibility for what's gone wrong for you. But as you said, there are going to be times when people have potentially, I wouldn't say maliciously done something, but that they have intentionally taken a shortcut, that they know they shouldn't be taking. And that does require a conversation, but it is the way you approach that conversation. And rather than um, going in with a softly approach and telling them how wonderful they are, let's just go in and be honest and say, I want you to succeed. I want you to develop. I want you to learn. This wasn't the right way to go about it. How are we going to stop this from happening in the future? And it's that direct openness that actually people do respect, and do respect that level of communication. If you go in with, well, I think you're wonderful, and 90% of the time what you do is wonderful, and this thing that you did was brilliant, and this thing that you did was brilliant, you're just filling out the time with fluff, because most people are going to focus on the negative comment anyway.
Yeah.
That's what we do. We focus on the negative, not the positive. So actually, let's make it less negative, but more of a growth opportunity. So let's say it as a way that you can learn, you can develop, you can be the best version of yourself within this business. So yeah, it is all about that communication.
I agree. And even like with that feedback, there's one thing that I heard which really stuck with me, that when we approach people when they have made mistake, it's more so from place of, I know you can do better. I know you're like, I know that about you. Um, and I think it's kind of communicating that belief that you have in them of, I know you can do better. I just know that. And and through that, I think in some ways people borrow some of that belief from you, and they start to see that, oh, you're not here to again judge me and attack me. You're here to tell me I can do better. And again, not from like negative place, but I just believe in you. I know you can perform way better than or like you can avoid these mistakes or whatever might be the situation. But it's something that really stuck with me, that I know that if somebody approached me that way, I would be like, wow, they actually think so highly of me. I actually want to get to that level, instead of when you're beat down or you're having that not as positive feedback, then it's not likely you will be inspired to go and go the extra mile or work on it. Or if you would be, it would be coming out of fear or some negative emotions, which again doesn't really add to the mental health aspect of the workplace.
Yeah, it is. It's that inspiration and motivation that you give people. So you can inspire people to achieve far more than they ever thought was possible, um, by using that curiosity, by not approaching with judgment. Um, you can inspire people and motivate people to achieve more than they thought was possible. And you can only do that by showing them the areas where that growth is needed, because then suddenly they're seeing the changes that they're making and they're feeling the changes that they're making. So then they are motivated to keep going with that. So yeah, framing it, motivating, inspiring, it's all so creates such a positive atmosphere and positive culture.
How to find the balance between showing care, being friendly, and then at the same time still having boundaries and professionalism, or being seen as, I don't want to say authority, leader.
Yeah, but there has to be, there are so many different leadership styles, and at some point or another, you're going to have to adopt all those different leadership styles. So, as much as you want to be a coaching type leadership style or a facilitative leadership style, there are going to be times when you need to be more um, authoritative. There are going to be times when you need to say, actually, no, that can't happen again. That puts somebody at risk. That cannot happen. And so you have to balance those leadership styles constantly. You have to be able to adapt your style, adapt your communication for any situation. And I think because my team predominantly have been with me so long now, that they know where that sits. And I'd like to think that they do respect me for the knowledge and for the that I've got and the way that I lead. And so that respect is there, and they don't push past what they shouldn't be doing. Um, so yeah, I don't know how I manage it, but I do manage it. And I think that's just something that's come from taking what I've learned over the last nearly 30 years and putting that into practice and being able to be adaptable and flexible. Because as a leader, as a business owner, you 100% can't stay static. You have to adapt and mold and flex. So having those different leadership styles and those different communication styles enables you then to go into a conversation that says, listen, at the end of the day, this is the job you're here to do and this is what needs to be done. And then you build in that motivation. So then you go from that authoritative position into that coaching style of, but I know you can do it and I've seen you do it and I need you to do that consistently for me. So it's being able to flex to any situation, I think.
Do you have any advice on how to avoid the burnout from being supportive leader? Because it takes way less energy to not care, and Not especially when it comes to emotions and human and problems that comes with being human. And then if you have team that is reporting to you and you actually care for them, it's a lot. How to avoid the burning out or even like emotional overwhelm that might come with that.
It's difficult, and there have been times over the years where I have felt like I've almost burnt out. Um, so a lot of the team over the years have come to me with their own emotional difficulties, and things that they are struggling with. And I love that they feel able to do that. But I also have to remember that I'm not a therapist, I'm not a counsellor. And as much as I can offer some coaching, which is looking, towards the future and how we can adapt and change, I'm not going to be looking into their past and helping them fix any problems as they see them that might need fixing. So we can signpost, we can direct, we can offer support services to help people. But then in terms of yourself, it's if you are taking that in, so if you are almost being a sponge to all those emotions that people are struggling with, and then you take that home, that really becomes quite impactful. And this is why I'm so passionate about combining leadership with well-being. You cannot be an effective leader if you don't take care of yourself. So for me, that's training, so that's working out, that's eating well, that's prioritizing my sleep. I consider sleep to be the first pillar of health. And for years I was a really poor sleeper. And I did mull over everything that would happened and things that people had told me. But I've really concentrated on making sleep a priority for me. Because that allows me to function. It allows me to think clearly. It allows me to be more emotionally stable throughout the day. So I focus very much on my own well-being, sleep, eating well, um, training to give me the release from any pent-up anxiety, and it helps me just switch off. So I've got a very, very busy mind. I'm constantly thinking about the next step and the next step and the next action I'm going to take. When I'm training, for that hour, I don't think about anything apart from either how much pain I'm in or how many reps I've got to do or how awful this run is.
Yeah.
So I'm just focused for an hour on nothing. I'm not thinking about work. I'm not thinking about my family. Um, so that's a key element for me. And then having good support yourself, whether that's through a partner, a friend, a family member, having somebody that you can just go, oh, I not tell them everything, but just say I've had a crappy day. Just look after me for a little bit, or having your own therapist or coach or somebody that you can just offload on and share that load. It can be lonely being a manager. It can be lonely being a director of a business. You haven't got that same structure whereby you might get the support from the person above you, because if there's nobody there, you sometimes have to look externally for that support. But it is so important to manage your own well-being. Through COVID in our sector, we had to work. We all had children at home that we were trying to homeschool. We all had to, work in a very difficult, very upsetting, challenging environment. And I think lots of people were struggling with burnout at that time. Um, Myself included. That was a really challenging time for us. But I think keeping channels of communication open between everybody, supporting each other, looking out for each other, just it made the difference.
Um, I'm curious on what are some of the things about leadership that you used to believe that you no longer believe?
Um, I think some of it, I think you mentioned something before about, mistakes that people make and that shouldn't be happening anymore. And you always got that thought, you run through your head and you go, oh, you've been told this 10 times, so why is it still happening? I think I'm far more relaxed about that now, than I used to be. I think that's taken time, but I've come to the conclusion that some people are going to need a lot of hand-holding, and that doesn't mean to say they can't do the job. It doesn't mean to say they're not brilliant people, but actually their priorities are elsewhere sometimes, and repeating things is okay. And
It's
a lot of
human.
my job is repeating a lot of the same stuff, but I'm far more tolerant with that now than I used to be. So I think that's one key area of it. And another area I would say is about not being afraid of those difficult conversations. I think I used to, when I was younger or newer to the role, really dread the idea of conducting a disciplinary or a capability or a challenging conversation. And as much as I still don't like them, I understand for the bigger picture that it's absolutely necessary. We've created this culture, and I'm not prepared now to let that slide. So if somebody is coming in and their attitude is poor and is impacting the team, then that won't be tolerated. And people are told that from day one when they start with us, before they start with us. So I think I am far more confident in not letting things slide anymore, and seeing the bigger picture behind having those difficult conversations.
I love it. So that in itself, so many golden nuggets in that last answer alone for people that are in leadership positions, which, by the way, even being a parent, leadership position. We all
Absolutely.
are leaders in some capacity.
Absolutely. And part of the leadership program that I run is for people, and they go, well, I don't really think I'm a leader. I'm saying you are influencing people. No matter what your actual role is, you are constantly influencing people, and you are leading people or leading a situation or leading a project at some point. So yeah, everybody needs those leadership qualities.
Yeah. Before I ask you the last question, where can people learn about you, connect with you?
So the best place will be my new website when that's up and running at luminaleadership.co.uk. You can also find me on brand new Facebook pages for Lumina Wellbeing or Lumina Leadership. And then if they want to know a little bit more about the care side of the business, that's noelcarepartnership.co.uk. And I'm always happy just for people to book a call, have a chat, and I can share with you the links for that. So yeah, looking forward to connecting with people.
Yeah, all the links will be in the show notes as well. So last question I have for you is, what is one piece of wisdom you're still learning to live?
Still learning to
Live.
um I think it's just, you can never have too much patience. We are all guilty, no matter how zen we think we are all guilty of that patience not being equal across the board or not being where you want it to be. And I think dealing with people, whichever people it is, whether it's your own family, whether it's your employees, whether it's your service users, your customers, sometimes that patience can be stretched. But actually just having that patience can lead to curiosity, can lead to questions,
Yeah.
and lead to developing relationships. So yeah, always build on that patience.
All right. Well, Claire, thank you for coming on, sharing your wisdom. This was packed with value. And to everybody listening, if you're an expert with 20 plus years of experience and you want to come on, share your wisdom, there will be a link in the show notes how you can do that. And if you want to start a podcast, get on more podcasts, or need help with managing your podcast, there will be details below as well. Thank you for tuning in, and we will see you in the next episode.